Okay, thank you, Linda. Appreciate that. And so with that, then we can turn to Chair Westerman today. Please proceed.
All right. Good morning, everyone. At least from my window, it's a beautiful day outside and it's sunny and warm, above 30. So that's warm in Minnesota this time of year. I really appreciate all of the work that we got done yesterday. That was a lot of heavy lifting. So thank you. What I'd like to do to start out with today is something just a little bit different. But again, share your name with everyone and share what you're currently reading or something that you've read recently that stands out to you. So I'm Gwen Westerman. I'm the chair for the task force. And right now I'm reading Team of Rivals about President Lincoln and his choices of cabinet members and advisors, and kind of late to the game for that particular text, but I really appreciate Doris Kearns Goodwin as a historian and as a writer. So it's a sad story in some places, but it's very familiar in others when it comes to how people choose their support staff around them and how they create collaboration. So you haven't read Team of Rivals, put that on your list. We'll go in alphabetical order this time. So that means, Jason, you're up.
Good morning. I'm reading a book called Thunder at Twilight, Vienna 1913 by an author named Frederick Morton. It's an older book, but chronicles the intellectual and political milieu of Vienna on the eve of the First World War. So an incredible cast of characters who came together and were present there during that time. Really fantastic and good read.
Excellent. Dana.
I'm reading When We Believed in Mermaids, but I just started it, so I really can't give much of a book review, but it was highly recommended to me.
Okay. Dr. Bean.
I am reading, I read a lot of history within my job, my everyday job, but what I'm reading in my own time is a book called It's Okay to Laugh, Crying is Cool Too, a memoir by Nora McInerney. And she writes a lot about how we use humor to get us through tough times in life. And I think it's really fitting to remember to laugh when we're dealing with a lot of dealing with this pandemic and being away from our loved ones, and sometimes being too close to our loved ones all in the house together. And remembering to laugh is important.
Auditor Baha.
I was trying to find the book and I realized I don't know where I've laid it, but a couple books. I like to read books by people I know. And I'm so proud of the fact that so many of my friends are now writing books. So I read like my stepson is a writer. So Why Did Santa Leave a Body? Very good book, talk about laughing in tough times. It's murder mysteries that center around Christmas. And also, and I think David Kelleher will appreciate this too. Also, Minneapolis, an Urban Biography, which is a Minnesota Historical Society Press book. I love MNHS Press. It's really good. It's deep, but it's a quick read. And it's also, it has a long, appropriately long history of Minneapolis. And it's from everything from geography to lying about the census. It's just wild, all the stuff that's happened in Minneapolis. So get that one.
We're going to have a great reading list. Lindsay.
Good morning. So I cherish my New York Times Sunday.
Oh, you froze up.
Lindsay, if you can hear us, your video is frozen, so we can come back to you. And if your connection is not as strong, you could always turn your video off. Sometimes that helps.
Okay. All right. So we'll check in with Jessica.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jessica Intermill. I am usually a nonfiction girl, so I've been trying to push my boundaries a little bit more while I've been working from home, and picked up Friday Black, which is a collection of short stories in a sort of dystopian future, but really well done in terms of really piercing themes and also really well written, which I really appreciate. That, you know, when we talked yesterday about the need for clarity in writing, it's so precise and spot on that it just sings.
Sings, you said? Okay. Pretty high praise for somebody who is a nonfiction girl. Okay. Lindsay, want to come back to you?
I'm back. I don't know what happened. My light was flickering and then our internet went out. So it's like lightning just struck as I was speaking. What are the odds? That was all I was saying, is my New York Times that's sitting right back there and it piles up. And I love reading magazines. I have magazine subscriptions. And so that's what I do.
I've been trying for 2 years to get the Sunday edition of the New York Times, but I live in a rural area and they don't acknowledge me. All right, Dr. Jolly.
Oh my, well, my wife asked me not to reveal what I read, but you know, you've got to know I'm an electrical engineer with undergraduate training in physics and advanced degrees in mathematics and cognitive science. So I am reading Emotion Detection from Speech Recognition by Al-Hamid, and it's about the use of Fourier analysis and signal detection theory to understand affect and speech recognition modeling. The more important part is you begin to realize through Fourier analysis that every culture and every language has a rhythm and specificity to its own. And as I was thinking about that book in context of our meeting yesterday, I realized just how much any of my relatives would feel absolutely the door was slammed in the face the minute they opened the policy that was written. And so all of the conversation about making it accessible and understandable and removing definitions of the definitions is resonant in this book for understanding how we can communicate with each other. So that's my reading list.
Oh. Working with international students has helped me really appreciate a different perspective on language and storytelling. So and the physics part of it is interesting too. All right, let's see, Jennifer's power is out, or internet went out. So we'll come back to her. And Tish, what are you reading?
Good morning, everyone. I am reading Robert Pinsky's Singing School. It's an anthology and collection of poetry that sort of antagonistically and sarcastically pokes at you in case you want to write based off of anything that you read. I'm a poet. That's my jam. So I often read poetry collections.
Great. Representative Lee.
Good morning, everyone. Right now, I just finished President John F. Kennedy's book, Profiles in Courage. I just think that it's really relevant to, the political atmosphere that we live in today. And, regardless of your political affiliation or whatnot, I just think that for myself as an elected official and for elected officials, we really should, read the book and see, what are we doing courageously or not. And so I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Let's see, is Senator Nelson here today? I don't think so. Okay. Commissioner Roberts Davis.
Good morning, everyone. I'm in my mobile office today. I feel like I'm bringing down the curve a little bit because I'm not a big reader. But when I do read, I have a teenage daughter, and I typically find a lot of enjoyment in reading and rereading things that I read when I was her age, based on what her syllabi are in school. And so whatever they're reading, I tend to pick up and find some enjoyment in that and finding some things. And I also like reading articles, kind of like Lindsay. I like law review articles as well. Sometimes I find a lot of enjoyment in those also. So most recently we were reading a screenplay called Appropriate, and it looks like we're starting Into the Wild this trimester in English. So I'll read along with her on that one as well.
I have the entire Little House series. I've never read it, which is a terrible thing to say. Soda, but it's coming up on an publishing anniversary, so that little.
I love those as a kid.
Yeah. Okay. Daniel. I don't see him in our list.
I am here. I don't have video. Well, hopefully my Christmas present from our tech office will be a new computer before year's end. I am reading Isabel Wilkerson's Cast, and just about through an incredible read, and recommend it to folks on this call.
Okay. You're the phone number that's showing up.
I am not the phone number.
Oh, no. Okay, there, your name popped up. All right. Okay. Did I catch everyone?
Jennifer, is that you on the phone, maybe?
Yes, this is Jennifer Jones. I'm sorry, I had a very strange power outage at my house just now, so I'm sitting here in the dark, and I'm having to call into the line. So. Okay.
So if you're in the dark, you're probably not reading much right now, but.
Well, I can tell you that the book that I've just started is called The Brutish Museums, the Banging Bronzes, Colonial Violence and Cultural Restitution. It was, I think, in the Washington Post, one of the 10 best books on art this year. Haven't gotten very far into it, but I'm looking forward to it.
Good.
Jennifer, are you in St. Paul?
Yes.
I wonder if we had the same little outage.
Oh.
Who knows?
Yeah.
That's a possibility for sure. All right, did I catch everyone? I think so. All right then, thank you. I'm always interested in what other people are reading, and find some great recommendations or other things that pique my interest. Other than policies. I didn't hear anybody say, I'm reading more policies. So again, thank you for a great discussion yesterday. I think we just really made some good observations, some critical and analytical observations about this work that we're doing. And I'm glad we had the opportunity to brainstorm together and come up with some really good points. It was a good opportunity for us to focus on the language and pay attention to the words, the intended readers, the intentions of the policy writers. And it raised some important concerns about the policy itself and good questions about the process. And as we discussed at the end of the meeting yesterday, those are the concerns and questions that we'll focus on addressing in our upcoming meetings. And Jason yesterday used the word roadmap to talk about how we turn our ideas into next steps. So my hope is at the end of our session today that we'll review the draft roadmap that staff emailed out last night and agree on its high-level structure after we've provided some suggestions and changes. And we can also talk more specifically about each of the meetings that will appear in the draft, including the January meeting, which includes a number of different presentations to give us a kind of a broader view of what's happening in other places as we start into our work. But before we get into that, I'd like to just briefly return to our conversation from yesterday. Are there any other thoughts that you have or would like to bring forward as we had an opportunity to review and reflect on the list that we created? This is where we need the cricket soundtrack. And, okay, no other comments. All right then. Our goal today is to identify any last concerns or points that you would like to add to the list that we generated yesterday. And do you think the list accurately reflects our conversation? I can't see your heads nod, but, and I'm not sure why I have my hand up. Okay. So we're good to go on the list from yesterday. Oh, okay. Dana, you didn't get an email?
I did not. I just checked again on my phone. I don't have anything from staff.
Okay, we'll check on that. Everyone
and I
else?
can follow up and send you an email right now.
Okay, good. Dr. Jolly?
I think that they did a very fine job of capturing the notes of our conversation. I did have a refinement of a thought that was put forward earlier about the idea that of review, and that is there's a lack of any sense of periodicity, or as I would say, a rhythm to the reviews. And I wonder if I could add to the notes that we might consider a sunset or renewal review at least once every 20 years for everything that we've put there, and allow the next generation to have a voice on the history that we are commemorating.
Okay. Good suggestion. And that's not something that's in there now. And even though we know the policy was updated, I think in 2012. Okay, any other comments about our discussion yesterday? Are there questions that we brought up yesterday that you can see addressed in future meeting agendas? Lindsay.
Hi, I've been trying to think of how to put this. So yesterday, I feel like we were talking about the memorials, And then we were talking about how high of a bar it is to get one in. You know, a lot of work from many, many people, a lot of conversations, a lot of maybe years. And I understand that, and that's important. And yes, it is expensive. And so the bar is very high for those permanent structures. I'm wondering, it has some language sprinkled in there, which was identified about the ceremonies, activities, trees in a certain, could all be considered as part of the purview of this this document. And I'm wondering if there's a way to further explore what that means. I know it was said, but I don't know if it was emphasized. How is there another way to present dialogue around type that's not that like stone structure? And can we give like another layer of more impermanent structure that might be something more current that the public can interact with? And I don't know if that's within the scope of this, but I wanted to say that because I felt like the bar was so high, and I just want to ensure that it feels more inclusive, that there are other options to participate.
Okay, so to focus some of our attention on those non-structural memorials that are listed in the policy now.
It seems like there may be a different practice for that. I don't know. Applying for one thing versus the other might have a different route.
Okay, good observation. Okay, anything else that might be addressed in our future agendas? I think we did a really thorough job yesterday.
So this is Eric. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble raising my hand.
Oh, okay.
Two notions. I wanted to echo support for what was just said. Museums no longer talk about permanent exhibits. They talk about long-term or core exhibits. And so I've put a note in the chat box about that. When we look at the goals and the roadmap on the January meeting dates, we talk about referring to other agencies and states that are reviewing their plans and their policies on the work that we're doing, similar to the work that we're doing. I would love to expand that to also look at relevant university cases. So many universities are ahead of states in dealing with the issues of commemoration, building names, and monuments and statues. So for example, the University of Illinois Champaign-Urbana last Friday announced their long-term plan to replace the imagery of Chief Illiniwek. And it has a really interesting set of both criteria and aftermath suggestions for when they remove the Chief Illiniwek, to keep honoring the voices of those who brought the chief forward to begin with, while recognizing those who find and stand in opposition to the chief. So I'd love to add a review of relevant top-line universities to things that might be in our policy consideration, in addition to just looking at what other state cap boards are doing.
Okay. Thank you for that. Tish.
Hey, thank you. So my hand did raise. Okay, I was having some trouble raising my hand too. I just want to sort of underscore the earlier section that myself and someone else brought up on the call yesterday, just around what are the state's priorities in terms of articulating the values or protecting or honoring the values and varied experiences of the citizens in terms of you know, thinking about and considering what history we are commemorating when erecting a monument and or statue, and if there's another sort of department within the state that can shine some light on that, if there is someone on staff that can dig up a document that is sort of a state articulation, just so we can dig into that a little bit more and help that or use that to inform future processes.
Okay. All right, I'm just watching Emmett add the notes here to make sure that we got your observations. Good work. Okay. Anybody else? Let me scroll down the list here and see if anybody else has their hand up. Okay. All right. And just in case you have difficulty raising your hand, take the initiative like Dr. Jolly did and just give us a shout out. All right, then what we'll do is move on to the roadmap and take a look at it. And our goal here is to review the roadmap, provide some input on it, and reach consensus on the next steps that are outlined there. And also, we want to identify a couple of volunteers for the work on reviewing other similar policies and presenting to the group at a future meeting. So I asked Emmett to draft this roadmap based on yesterday's conversation. And let's take a look at it and discuss it now so that we all are comfortable with its general outline. And then keep in mind, this is a living document, depending on how each meeting goes and what we do and don't accomplish. But the idea is that it lays out the work we might do in each meeting and the work that would need to happen between meetings. So feel free to share thoughts you have on it or to suggest changes. And if you haven't had time to review it, I can ask Emmett to briefly walk through it to provide context for the group. So I see your hand up, Auditor Blaha.
The only thing I wanted to mention it was about the timing of these meetings. As I'm looking at them, and we're going to be hitting during, I know, the legislative session, which would definitely affect several of us during some nice busy times. So I just to put it out there, if people, I know that I'm available in the evenings and on the weekends too. So if this meeting time, depending on how it works in people's schedules, I just want to say that. I don't know if it's helpful to be open to that, because one concern I always have is during the session something pops and then a bunch of us are gone,
Okay, thank you. You want to just give me a quick show of hands here? Would you like for Emmett to go through it, or did everybody have a chance to review it and are ready to discuss? So, Emmett, review. I don't see anybody raising their hands. Okay, well, let's think about how we want to address this. You want to go meeting by meeting, or I'll just open it up to a broad conversation? To ask for specific edits or questions that we have. Emmett, do you want to do a kind of a quick overview, just in case that elicits some comments or questions?
Yeah, certainly. So the meeting that we are currently involved in is this second meeting here, and just kind of goes through the conversation that we've already had. This next meeting in January, and throughout the rest of this document, the meetings are laid out in two parts with the idea that there would be a 2-hour segment and then a follow-up 2-hour segment as we've had so far. The meeting in January, based on some of the conversations yesterday, the first part would be an information-focused part that would involve presentations on some of the relevant topics of conversation that have come up already to really ground everyone in some shared information before diving into the framework of what changes need to be made. So there would be a presentation likely from CAP Board Executive Secretary Paul Mandel on, in particular, the Nellie Stone Johnson statue, but also on to answer some of the questions that came up in yesterday's conversation about how the CAP Board has made decisions and what this process has been like in the past on either approving or denying applications for new works or the conversations about alteration or removal that may have come up. Then a brief presentation from members of this group and staff would be supporting them as needed on the review of similar policies across the country, either state or similar CAP Board type jurisdictions or university processes, as Dr. Jolly mentioned. So that would be likely 2 members of this group sharing that presentation. Then there could be a brief update from Chair Crawford, who's the chair and Chair Westerman's counterpart in the Public Engagement Advisory Task Force, to share the results of their initial conversations and their work and timeline. And then a brief presentation as well from the Historical Society and CAP Board on the joint policy for art in the Capitol building, which isn't as much of a focus of this group, but is still very relevant to the conversation about artwork and commemorative works on the Capitol, at the Capitol. So that would be the first part. And the second part then would be taking both everything that we've addressed during these 2 meetings this week, in addition to those presentations, and then start to think about the policy itself and to create a framework for what changes need to be made. And then, for example, there could be buckets of work if the introduction to the policy needs to be worked on to be more plain language and accessible. The process itself could be discussed and worked on. Different forms and documents that it sounded like came up yesterday could be another kind of bucket of work, and then an FAQ or the website component, different options there. This is all just to begin a conversation or thinking about it. And then either the group could decide to work on it all together, or folks could volunteer to focus on specific parts of the conversation and then work with staff on advancing separate conversations about each of those buckets of work. So I can stop there for that meeting. But that's kind of the reflection here. And then in the interim, staff would support any of the either separate conversations or the group conversations about those buckets of work.
Okay. Any response or questions? Dana.
I did receive it, and I've got it up on my screen as well, and I'm looking at it. I just want to commend staff. I think this is a very logical and thoughtful way of putting this together. It makes sense. It gives us certainly plenty of time to work on this. The one question I have is I've never read a policy that was written well by a committee. And so I'm kind of hoping that we have some really good, solid staff work as usual, putting together the ideas for us to then reflect on. Or alternatively, as Emmett suggests, maybe we have very small working groups dealing with pieces of it. But I don't think we're in a position to put something together as a whole.
I would second your observations about writing by committee. Extremely difficult, especially when you have to argue with architects about the use of semicolons and commas. Paul. And then do the dates for the fourth meeting run up against legislative session or other important dates at the Capitol. Okay. All right, do we want to go through the outlines for the rest of the meetings, Emmett?
Definitely. So after, so the interim work, as I'd mentioned, after the January meeting would be to begin the actual process once the group has decided what kind of buckets it wants to focus on in bringing together a new policy of some sort or editing the existing policy. The work would begin to actually start having conversations and then drafting that language. The idea is that the February meeting, which would be less than a month later, would be the opportunity for either staff to provide updates on each bucket of work, or if the group felt as if it wanted to do smaller kind of breakout groups to focus on each of these, to just kind of provide an opportunity for discussion. We could share screens and show draft language as it's been in development, and just kind of collectively have a conversation about whether things are tracking in the way that the larger group imagines. That might be the first meeting, with some ability to incorporate changes and just track notes during that discussion. And then the second meeting in February would focus on kind of hearing from the Public Engagement Advisory Task Force on the work that they've done and whether or not by that point they would have some recommendations to this group on how the public engagement element of the overall policy, what language might look like for that, or just kind of the values and the thinking they've been doing. And I know this group has thought a lot about that already too, and so it could just be a discussion with that group as well. Wouldn't necessarily have to be them providing language itself, but I think the extent to which we can make sure that that group is able to kind of funnel a lot of its thinking into some of the specific policy language might be helpful. So that would be the idea for the February meeting. And then in the interim, staff would incorporate edits and send out kind of an updated draft. And then there could be some email exchange if members of the task force wanted any other specific edits. And then by the fifth meeting in March, we would be able to review in the first one the draft language, which might include either a new policy if the task force determines that a whole new policy is the best way to go, or edits, and then also the forms or materials that accompany that policy. And then there would be an opportunity to review suggestions that the public engagement group has shared and kind of determine if that draft language is in the form that the group would feel comfortable with including in the final report. And then the second part would be this kind of other bucket, which is not as specific to the policy language, but is included in the kind of deliverables, which is recommendations for the board broadly, the CAP board broadly, to increase kind of the access to this document and things like that. And then in the interim there, the staff would be able to draft the report itself, include the recommendations and the suggested edits or new language for the policy. And then at the final meeting in April, the larger task force would be able to review that final report, provide edits, and then figure out a process for confirming the final language before sending it on to the CAP board. And then I have here in the summer of 2021 sometime a presentation by this group to the CAP board, to a full meeting of the CAP board itself, to explain the process and to officially kind of deliver the recommendations and answer questions that the CAP board members might have. So that's kind of the thinking behind each of these. And I'm happy to answer any questions on timeline if folks have them.
Okay, so there's our roadmap. questions, concerns? And thank you, Dana, for reminding us that writing is done better in small groups. And Auditor Blaha for suggesting other times when schedules might be particularly full because of the legislative process. All right, then. Do we have additional volunteer or two to work with Dana Badgerow on reviewing other similar policies around the country to present in January? Dana, you had your hand up.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair. I was actually moving on to another topic. Yes, it is true that I, outside of this meeting, I did volunteer to Emmett to work on that and to do some of that research.
So we would need one other volunteer.
Emmett and I could get it done.
And I will say that Peter Musty, who's on and who has been a part of these conversations all throughout, has already done some really great work on identifying specific policies and has pulled together a matrix that provides a good starting point. And so Peter and I are happy to help you, Dana, and then if anyone else is interested and would like the email after this meeting, we'd be happy to support in that work as well.
Okay, great. So if you don't want to raise your hand right now, think about it and then get back to us today or tomorrow. Emmett, what kind of deadline do we want here?
I think by the end of this week, by Friday, would make sense on that one.
All right, so check your calendars and commitments and let us know if you'd like to help lead the review of other policies. Okay, that's the end of our agenda for this morning. Any other comments? Is there something? Oh, Dana, your hand is up again.
Yes, this was the point I was going to make earlier, Madam Chair.
Okay.
The news reports this week concerning the criminal case and the mediation that occurred around it made some comment that a task force is working on this issue and will determine the disposition of the Columbus statue. I don't think that's within our charter, is it?
Not to my understanding. Our job is to take a look at the process itself and not to make any decisions.
Maybe the reporter just misunderstood and took liberties.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Paul here. My understanding is that this the results of the work that you would do, which will set up some of the policies, would then be applied by the CAP board. The first test likely being the determination of what happens to Columbus.
Okay.
That's my assumption.
And yes, Tish, there is another task force, and that task force is concerned with public engagement. And that's also my understanding, Emmett, that they're looking at process and not making decisions.
Yep, both are advisory task forces to the CAP board. So that was likely erroneous reporting if it was about either of these task forces deciding what happens with that particular statue. the public engagement group, just so everyone has the context, and hopefully we'll hear more from Chair Crawford at the January meeting, but that the public engagement group is really focused on doing outreach and hearing from Minnesotans about the values that they want to see reflected at the Capitol and in the commemorative works and things like that. And their report is going to focus less on the specific nature of a policy and more on some of the criteria and thinking about values that they would like CAP board and that they recommend CAP board members to be thinking about when voting on or making decisions about questions that come up in the policy and the kind of the process that this group has focused on establishing or making recommendations on. Does that make sense?
Yes. Did you have another comment, Dana? Oh, you're muted. Okay. And then,
sorry.
We're just having trouble with our hands today. And then Dr. Bean also mentioned that just reinforced what our understanding is, that the CAP board is the body that makes the decisions, and then the Historical Society is the one that is in charge of disposition or accession. Okay, good questions. All right then. Thank you all very much. Before we head out today, in one word, I'd like to hear how you feel about the work ahead of us. Okay. And I'm excited. Jason.
I think we're disciplined.
Oh, yes. Dana.
Encouraged.
Okay. Dr. Bean.
Ready.
All right. Auditor Blaha.
Organized.
Okay. Lindsay.
Smart.
Say that again.
Smart.
Okay. Jessica.
I'm also excited.
Dr. Jolly.
My most hopeful term is transformational.
These are even giving me more inspiration. Jennifer.
Confident.
Okay. Tish.
Hopeful.
All right. Commissioner Roberts Davis.
For the second day, I'm going with efficient.
That makes me feel good. Representative Lee.
Excited.
All right. And Daniel.
Prepared.
Okay. And then who was on the phone? Did I get you already?
Yeah, that was me. That was Jennifer. I already got.
Okay. All right. All right then. We've got one last comment from Dr. Jolly.
Oh, I simply thought I had posted that at the very beginning of our discussion, not at the end. I'm sorry for the delay.
Okay. Not a problem. All right. Thank you all very much. I hope you have a peaceful and invigorating holiday season in spite of all of the pressures and tensions that we have around us, and that we see some more smiling faces and good news in the new year. So thank you very much. We'll see you in January.
Thank you.